All right, let's get this started. Wow, this feels weird. Good evening. My name is Logan,
And I'm Colin.
and welcome back to the Two Americans podcast, episode 10, 6 years too late.
How does it feel to be back on the air?
It
The,
feels really weird. I feel like we're kind of like getting the rust off here. So,
yeah, it feels like a bike that's been left outside for too long.
oh yeah, for sure.
It's got all
So,
the tangles in it.
quickly look back. The last time we recorded was I believe a Champions League round of 16 reactions from around February or March of 2017. So it's interesting now going into the quarterfinals 6 years later of this year. It's interesting to see how that has kind of changed. So lots to cover today. We're going to talk about the future of the podcast, how we're going to cover our local club, and we're going to do some looking back as well as talk about current events type things. So, with the return of the podcast, we're looking at bi-weekly posting of things when it comes to episodes. We're going to try to find out where we're going to post them at. I'd say for right now, SoundCloud is where we're going to start at. But
We
my goal
got to
personally,
recover some old passwords, don't we?
yeah, we do.
I
We can
know.
look at, we're going to look at YouTube most likely because that's an easy one because we can just pull the audio. Or we'll look long term into Apple Podcasts along with Spotify. I feel like the ways of getting that done now are a little bit easier than what they were in
Yeah.
2017.
Thankfully, they lowered their standards for the likes of us degenerates.
Yes, for sure, for sure. With that though, it's interesting. So to give a little bit of idea of like what we're looking at here is we do plan on talking about our original platform, which would be mostly Europe, but we're also going to cover our local club too. But here's the funny thing is neither of us are going to be at the game. So if we are, it might be once, it might be twice.
It will be in spirit, though. Although I think we'll definitely be in town. I'll be
Mm.
in town during the summer, so at least for some portion, I should be able to get to some home games if my schedule lines up. But hopefully, we can do a good job covering the action from the sidelines, so to speak.
Yes, it's good. It's good to be a fan too. Um,
It
so
does.
we're looking at that. So tonight we're going to talk about some things from the past. We'll also talk about current situation in Europe as well as talking about our local club, Indy 11. But first, let's look back on the last 6 years. So, Colin, tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I finished up my undergrad degree in economics and with a minor in mathematics from Ball State in 2018. And ever since 2018, I've been faithfully and fruitfully, although sometimes fruitlessly pursuing my PhD in economics out at West Virginia University. So if anyone wants some economics takes, that's what I come in here for. Although I don't just throw numbers around because that's for the stat heads, and I do economics, not stats.
Good old country roads.
Good old country roads. And my Arsenal, boy, it's been a long time since they've done anything. I've still had my Steam profile picture as a stick man poking the Arsenal badge saying, do something. I think that's been my profile picture for last 10 years or so, ever since I started following Arsenal. Ever since I started following them in like 2015, it's always been Arsenal do something, and they might finally do something this year. But we'll see what happens against Palace on Sunday.
So, to look back on where our clubs have been since 2017, speaking on Arsenal first, so they're currently first in the Premier League, which
Yeah,
has
it
been
feels surreal. I actively tell all my friends who either like soccer or footy, or people who do and don't. I don't know what to do with myself. We're first in the league, and we feel like we deserve it. And I don't know what's going to happen if we win the league. I might have to cut my hair or do something.
Do dreads. Go
Yeah,
the extra mile.
I'll have to get the Arsenal badge, go to a proper barber shop and pay for an AFC in the side.
Hey,
Uh,
nothing wrong with maybe getting some ink. Get you a tattoo. So
nah, that's a little too much. Not until life settles down. But I definitely know what I'd be getting tattooed. It'd be the Arsenal guy poking the stick, saying, "We did something. We did
so
something." 2023, 2024,
few fun stats on this. They've won the FA Cup twice since 2017. They won it in 2017 and in
Yeah.
2020. And then they
Still,
also won the
I
FA Community Shield in the same years.
those two FA Cups are still more than Tottenham have ever done. So, even in 6 years, we still got more accomplished than Tottenham have ever thought of doing.
It's really interesting. So coming from my angle, where I've been the last 6 years. So 2017, I left Indiana. I joined the Marine Corps. I got out at the beginning of the pandemic. I've been out since about mid 2020, and then I've lived in Southern Indiana now for about 2 years. Going to school for a psychology degree. Gonna finish that and go on and do some type of grad program to be a counselor. Now, as for my soccer fandom, it kind of went up and down. I've kept in touch with the American side of things following Indy 11 in Portland, but I haven't really watched much of Europe because when I lived on the West Coast, I had to deal with mountain time. So a lot of times, like waking
Yeah.
up to watch the Premier League, it would be like 5 o'clock in the morning. But I've kind of gotten back to it. I can say that I was in a room when Liverpool won the Champions League last in 2019, so I guess I'll give myself that. But I'm getting
Yeah.
reacquainted with it. So currently, Liverpool sits sixth in the Premier League. It's
Well,
kind of surprising.
how many titles do you have since 20? How many titles do you have? How many titles have you won lately?
We won our first one in like 30 years in 2019, the 2020 season. So that's really cool. Been up there in the Champions League too. Real Madrid is our crutch. They are daddy.
Real Madrid have made a habit of making a lot of people of being a lot of people's daddy in the Champions League. So I don't think you can feel too bad about that. I'm not a Real Madrista by any means, but Jesus Christ, it's hard to deny that they have had a grip on the Champions League in recent years.
It's amazing too how Carlo Ancelotti left the club, went and pretty much, aside from his time at Bayern, pretty much managed a couple bottom feeder teams in the Premier League.
He was at Everton when they were at a absolute dearth of anything.
Oh yeah, and now they're about to get relegated, so shit happens.
Man, imagine the Merseyside derby not happening because Everton just went and got themselves relegated.
Well, a few times this year, the way Liverpool's played, you question if they're even going to be able to be.
6 years ago, they were like consistently finishing 8th or 7th, and now then they just fell off a cliff in the recent years. Feeding near like 14th or something. What they finished like last year, like somewhere
they were down there because they ended up getting Frank as their manager, and then this year he ended up getting sacked, and then I think Sam Allardyce Sean Dyche
yeah,
is trying to save
Sean
them
Dyche of the ever thorn in everyone's side Burnley. I hate Sean Dyche. I'm going to say this on the podcast. I hate Sean Dyche. I hate his style of football, but gosh damn it, I just respect him. He is like Big Sam Allardyce played that kind of hoof it and go for it type of counterattack. But Sean Dyche was just a low block. I'm going to be as English. Like he would make Stoke City happy if Stoke City were even relevant again. Like Sean Dyche feels like he would make Stoke City the best rugby team in football.
Oh yeah. Well, aren't they? Are they still in the championship, or are they in League One now?
I want to say they're in the championship, but they have, but
Yeah.
ever since like Jack Butland went and got himself like busted up, I think he like fractured his arm or leg or something. Ever since their goalkeeper of the future got injured, and they realized, oh, their only talent was a goalkeeper who was young and English, and that was pretty much his reason he should have been sold for like 30 million, 40 million pounds. But yeah, no, they've been. I'm glad I haven't seen Stoke City, man. They're rugby players, but they're my favorite rugby team. But man,
So
so how does it feel to win the league? How did it feel to be on top? And
honestly, it's one of those things where, because I know in their situation, because it's been between Liverpool and Manchester City the last 4 or 5 years up until this year, obviously. Um, it was always interesting seeing if there was a way that Liverpool would be able to top Man City in the standings, especially with it being like a 1 to 2 point deficit. I think the year we won the Champions League finally, no, the first year we went to the final of that time period, obviously. I think we were 2 points off, and then the thing that I thought was interesting about it is when they finally won the Premier League was at the height of the restrictions and everything, and I think the Premier League ended in August that year, so it's interesting, honestly, looking back on it. But the thing that's funny about now is the team's about to go through another big, rebuild. So the question
yeah,
will be: is if will Klopp stay this summer, or will they decide to go in a different direction? I've got a feeling as of right now, just from what I understand of what all's going on, it looks like he's gonna stay because there's only 12 games left, and
oh
just to pull
yeah.
up the table currently.
I mean, how would that
Uh,
feel? I mean, to get rid of Jurgen Klopp, though. I mean, let's also think Arsenal got rid of Arsene Wenger in the 6 years that we've been
oh yeah,
away. Arsene Wenger, Merci Arsene, last game was against Burnley, beat the shit out of him. You know,
so in
Hello
order
Sean Dyche, everyone's favorite callback joke.
in
But
uh in order for Liverpool to qualify for the Champions League, they will need to somehow gain 6 points to get into fourth. The funny thing is this year in the Premier League has also been interesting because you're seeing the rise of Newcastle. They've got a lot going on there.
oh
Brighton's been
God,
solid this year.
how good, talking about our mutual friend David Rosenfeld, how good does it feel to see him happy with
Oh
Newcastle?
yeah. Well,
When
the thing I told him was I was like, how does it feel to like know that you're up there?
yeah,
Being a fan of a club that historically has been fantastic, but in
yeah,
recent years is
suffered sort of a Midwestern style decline, as yeah, as economic heart, it's not the, it's in a rough place, I think, relatively speaking. I don't think, Newcastle upon Tyne has been the most economically vibrant of places, but it's a cultural, it's got a distinct Geordie culture. It's good to, it's a team that's always been well supported with a ton of great, individuals that just make it fun to watch Newcastle. And now that they finally have the Saudi, was it a Saudi consortium that bought them? Was it the Saudi royal family, or was it a different royal family?
I want to say it was the Saudi, because now the investors for Qatar that fund PSG are looking into buying a Premier League team.
Well,
So
maybe
I don't think
maybe Qatar could send us some money and we drop the Emirates sponsorship.
that or save you from Stan. One thing I think is
Oh
funny
God,
is
I fucking hate Stan Kroenke. Like the one thing that if Arsenal win the title, it's not because we have good owners. It's because we lucked into having a manager who has the kind of vision and has been backed up by his players. And we have Bukayo Saka, who's basically the English Mo Salah. Basically, remember when Raheem Sterling was hot shit like 7-8 years ago?
Oh yeah.
This is what it feels like to own Raheem Sterling, in the sense of like your team owns like Raheem Sterling. When Raheem Sterling was hot shit, you feel like we are the future of England. That's what it feels like being an Arsenal fan right now. We got all these English players. We have a team that feels like it's young, cohesive, doesn't have too many age issues. We don't have we don't have Ballsack Mustafi playing at center back, giving up a goal every game because he makes a stupid mistake. No, like Arsenal feel like what it felt like to see Liverpool like come up, but we're a little too young to really be that. That's why we got knocked out of Europa League. We're just too young in some of these like major areas. But that it feels like it's the opposite problem with Liverpool. I mean, what, you had to get rid of Mane?
I wouldn't say we had to. I think it was more so he chose to leave. But the thing that's interesting about that whole deal too is I feel like his departure was a big reason why they dropped off so hard this year. Because
Mane was an incredible player ever since he was with what, Southampton,
oh
or was
yeah,
it Sunderland?
it was Southampton. And another thing too, it's like being somebody who kind of lightly follows the Bundesliga. It's kind of nice to see players leave the Premier League that had pretty much played most of their professional career in the EPL and go elsewhere and do really well. So, all props to him on that. I know Bayern has struggled a little bit this year, but
I mean,
it's one of those things
Bayern
where
are, yeah, Bayern are Bayern though. I mean,
yeah,
even if they don't win it this year, I mean, that's it's the end of the world that Bayern aren't running away with it right now.
oh yeah.
But
I
even
would
then,
say from the
they're what?
standpoint of the calendar, at least for the Europe side of football this year, with the World Cup being the way it is, it's like with Liverpool's performances this year. The thing that really threw me off this year so far is we managed to beat, I think it was Southampton, like 7 or 8-0 earlier on in the year, and then they went on the spree where they lost so many matches, and then now we're doing it again where we beat Man United. And I'm pretty sure we lost again.
Quick a quick question regarding the Bundesliga because it came up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me who's fourth in the Bundesliga?
Isn't it Union?
It's fucking Union Berlin.
Yeah.
6 years ago, they were in like the fucking third tier. I remember that they were just fucking nowhere, and they were and now they're sitting fourth, and they're up there with like Leipzig and Freiburg, and that's
too
also
because
it's also interesting seeing Freiburg doing so good. Freiburg are normally a team that finish like what, 13th, 14th, if they're not like fighting relegation.
that or they were in Bundesliga too. Oh, the thing that's interesting is I'm pretty sure the rise of Leipzig was right around the time that we paused the pod last.
I want to say that I was on record as being a Ralph Hasenhutl fan, and how good has my prediction that he would be a great coach turned out to be. He had a great spell in Leipzig, and how much good work has he done at Southampton?
Now that I'm not sure.
I'll say he's been Southampton have not had the best academy results in terms of, Southampton normally you think of as a team, at least like maybe in the, if you were thinking back in like 2015, 2016, Southampton were an academy, powerhouse. They would almost always produce a couple of players, if you think about like historically Theo Walcott, they sold him for a bucket. They would always have, guys like Mane. But lately they just don't have some of that talent. I mean, but Hasenhuttle's managed them and, gotten a team that, quite frankly, could be relegated under almost any other manager and kept them up. And I consider that a big win, considering the fact that he, took Ingolstadt from nothing to, at one point, being a mid-table Bundesliga team.
Well, it's something to say too that now you're seeing more managers from the outside coming in that aren't managing
Well,
the
and
big
isn't
six.
it, and I forget where it is, but isn't there like some like 30 some manager, remember like Julian Nagelsmann with like
Mm-hmm.
Hoffenheim, or what was it? You
And he's with
know,
Bayern now.
yeah, yeah. And Nagelsmann 6 years ago, or less than 6 years ago, was like a fresh young man. I forget the name of this dude, but he's young and he's got some team. I want to say it's in Portugal. And he's managing the absolute shit out of them. Or there's so much good managing going on these days. But I think
Is
we I
it
think I
is it
think
Benfica because they managed to make the Champions League
maybe.
quarterfinals?
Well, yeah, and Portugal always has some great football teams, except fuck Sporting. They're kind of They're kind of dickheads. I'm not.
Well,
I'm not gonna.
another.
I'm not a big. I'm not a Sporting fan. Maybe it's just my recent today.
I know. One thing I think is interesting about Benfica and their situation is they're another one of those clubs where they produce so well, either domestically with the Portuguese FA, but also players from abroad. Like you got a lot of
Yeah,
Argentinian players that they'll end up in Portugal because it's a nice medium before you go into La Liga or
yeah.
maybe the Premier League even.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and while we're talking about kind of surprises that have happened over talk about the rise of just some young superstars. Let's talk about like Erling Haaland. I
oh yeah,
remember where I can't remember where I was, but I distinctly remember on my foot mob watching the result of Erling Haaland scoring for Norway's like under 21 team and demolishing Guatemala. And he like scored like 9 goals. And I just thought to myself, what the absolute flying fuck is that? This kid
well
has got to be
no,
crazy. And I was just like, I've never heard of this Holland guy, but he's got to be good because you don't score like 9 goals in the U21 Euros and not be good. And then all of a sudden, I did, he, I think he was playing for like Leipzig or something. And then he goes to Dortmund, and oh my God, he just doesn't stop scoring.
and then add in
Holland, Holland.
Martin Odegaard finally broke ties
Oh,
with Real Madrid. He's done really
I
well with Arsenal.
and can I tell you this? Back 6 years
Mhm.
ago, when I was playing Football Manager, my Football Manager team would almost always have Martin Odegaard and Kieran Tierney, and they both play for Arsenal right now. Maybe not for long for Kieran Tierney because I think they may be selling him. I don't know why. We're not, it's not like we got a ton of people that can play left back at that level, but I'm just good. I'm glad to see from my days of playing Football Manager and recruiting a 15 or 16-year-old Kieran Tierney, or a 17. He was so young in that game, it was stupid. And you could sign him from Real Madrid for like $750,000 and breaking his release clause. And I thought, wow, for a young player, that's a great deal. Martin Odegaard, this guy I like. And then all of a sudden, now he plays for Arsenal. I'm just like, past me is very happy now.
I feel like he's one of those players where I feel like if he had the chance to, because I know he played when he was on loan. He played. I think he played in the Danish league.
I think he
I
played
feel
in
like
the
if he had,
Danish league, and then he played for like Real Sociedad. I think it was
yeah, I feel
fairly
like
productive there. I just don't think he was ever afforded the problem with Madrid is it's just such a tough team to break into, and he just wasn't Spanish and was kind of an outsider, relatively speaking, and was kind of just one of those business, players that never had to play for the club to say thank you for being a part of the club. We made money on you,
oh
and
yeah,
kind of like the Chelsea loan army. You know what I mean? Like if you're talking
oh
about
yeah.
how the back room of a club runs, it's not just the results on the pitch, it's how you improve your players' value over the course of the season. You
But
want
it's
to
like
you
another thing you got to think too is that Chelsea team in 2014 they managed to have Mo Salah and
oh
Kevin De Bruyne both went abroad, came back to the Premier League, and have balled out.
well,
I mean,
and if
more.
I'm going to say this, like Arsenal had the same thing happen with Serge Gnabry.
Mm-hmm.
He's been dominant as an attacking midfielder for Bayern, one of their best players. If you ask a Bayern player, they'll tell you he's been one of their most productive players over the last ever since he made the move. And you know what? And you know who I will not forgive? I will never forgive Alexander Oxlade-Chamberlain, because that's the only reason Serge Gnabry left. Is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain was given a few extra games, and then he said he wanted to leave. He went to Liverpool, and it was in that summer window that we were like, we got rid of Gnabry. Okay, it's yours, Alex. And then Alex was like, I want to leave. And then sometimes you just see club matters. You lose your hands on good players, and then it comes back to bite you. But the loan system, I think, has been spectacular for Arsenal recently. I think we got like Florian Balogun, who's one of the top scorers in France right now. And we're like, what do we do when he comes back? Do we sell him for like 25-30 million, or do we use him as a backup?
Oh yeah,
Good problems to have, if you ask me.
it's it's coming from the angle of just seeing how talent has evolved over the last couple of years. It's like
What can we talk about? How
another
like
one,
certain
a big one we haven't brought up since the last time we've recorded. Because that one, one thing that's interesting is going back to that old episode, we talked about the rise of Monaco. Well, through that we had the rise of
Mbappe,
Kylian Mbappe, who's
and
done
I
really well at PSG and for the French national team. World
yeah.
Cup winner, World Cup finalist this past year. And that thing is that World Cup final was probably one of the best matches I've ever watched. It was
Yeah,
insane.
I mean, we had the World Cup in Russia with all the own goals you could ever imagine.
Oh yeah.
I didn't I kind of missed out on this year's World Cup. But I remember Russia, and I remember watching Mbappe, and uh, God, France is France has been dominant, and I do think they've just been, even if they haven't won everything, they damn well look like they could win anything they step on the pitch for.
Well, and
France,
another thing is the
PSG, and what? Let's talk about it in the last 6 years. Neymar and Messi end up on PSG and can't win shit besides League 1. And PSG has also not won League 1 every year, you know.
oh yeah.
So I mean, what? Like, let's just we can talk about PSG being an utter failure. We talk about the rise of Monaco and how Monaco, ended up selling what? We think about what's his name? Pedro. He plays for Man City, Portuguese. You know who I'm talking about. He played for Monaco. I mean, how many players from that Monaco team ended up going somewhere? And look at how Monaco maybe hasn't been successful since then, but they made their money, and they've stayed somewhat relevant even if they haven't been successful. But
Right.
let's look at a team that I was high on 6 years ago. I thought they had a really good, solid attacking core. And even though Lorenzo Insigne is no longer there, Napoli are going to stroll to a title this year.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely stroll to a title. And that's not even thinking about Juventus's scandal that saw them lose, what, 15 points or 10 points or something in the league for fancy accounting work that maybe didn't quite add up. I mean,
Well, it's interesting too how the tides have churned in Italy too, because that earlier on Juventus was on their roll, and I think, what was it, in the last 3 years Inter has won the league. AC Milan won it last year, so now Napoli has a chance to win it.
Yeah.
Jose Mourinho is at AS Roma now too. So
And
I think
Mourinho's found some good success playing some actually attractive football with Roma.
it's interesting how I think at that point he was at Man United still, and then he got sacked from Man United, did a short spell at Tottenham, had a chance to help Tottenham go to their first cup final, didn't manage in it because he got sacked, and then they lost the cup final. So funny how that works.
Let's see if our last episode in 2016.
2017.
Okay. So let's put it this way: we're like last time we talked in our last time we did it, Arteta had just got done playing for Arsenal and now is managing Arsenal to a potential title.
It's
Let's talk about that rise from Pep Guardiola's like secondhand man and one of his best player coaches to now managing Arsenal through thick and thin since 2019 to potentially a title. At the very least, the best competitive season I've seen Arsenal put together since maybe 2015.
Oh yeah.
Like since 2015, since Leicester won. Didn't last time we talked, Leicester had recently won the league, and aren't they still a round team?
So they won the league in 14-15, I believe. Is that right? Or it wasn't 14-15 because it would have been Man City. It would have been 15-16. So they were the champions at that point. And then that year was 2017. So I'm pretty sure Chelsea won the league that year.
Yeah, and we had guys like Riyad Mahrez and N'Golo Kante getting sold off. Can we also talk about Danny, who drinks water, being the worst transfer ever to Chelsea?
Oh, that's just...
I distinctly remember that, and that being absolutely the funniest thing. So I think we only have like about 6 minutes left on our meeting time that we can run. So we should probably start to wrap this up. I mean, Indy 11, we drew the first game. We're both excited for the season.
We'll just start. What we'll do is we'll just start a new meeting and we'll talk about Indy related stuff. And then I can pull the files and we'll go from there at that.
But maybe we should wrap up, maybe look at some of the Champions League. I mean, you got Benfica went through, Chelsea beat Dortmund, Bayern burying PSG. The history of the Tottenham is that they lose 1-0 to Milan. Absolutely fucking embarrassing for Tottenham. You gotta love it. Inter go over Porto. Man City smashed Leipzig 7-0 on Tuesday.
It's interesting to see Chelsea is still in the mix with all of the issues that they've had this year, which, I mean, I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt because Roman finally
they got money. They got money. They got talent. The question is, do they have an identity? And I think the answer is maybe, but not in the Premier League.
Well, coming from somebody who follows a club where they've had mostly better in recent years, obviously, better appearances in Europe than they have the league, which they've been competitive in the league. It's one of those things where it's like it's a double-edged sword. It's like you want to be great domestically, but that Continental Cup is just it's a different type of feeling, if you know what I mean. But I'll be interested to see how it all ties up, especially on Benfica's side of things. It's always interesting to see clubs that typically don't make it that far, make it pretty far in.
Well, they usually make it far on the back of like some incredible player, and then like what Enzo Fernandez was it, who was sold for like 100-some million pounds.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, he only had like 15 appearances with them too. I mean, you got to think in recent years too. They had João Felix, where he ended up at Atletico. Now he's a Chelsea player. I think he's panned out better for Chelsea so far than he has for
I
Atletico, so he'll probably be there
although
long
although
term.
let's also admit Joao Felix is even if he wasn't successful, always he's a fine player.
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing I think is an issue with his
A
upbringing was
let's
he
also
got he
talk.
got thrown to the fire way too early. I think this
Yeah,
will be time for him to finally
and also
edge out
Kepa
more.
Arrizabalaga is finally back as the starting keeper for Chelsea.
Oh yeah, did not expect that either because it's been between him and Mendy. Um, as of right now, I expect Bayern and Real Madrid to probably be the obvious favorites to make it to the semifinals. I have a feeling it's going to be another one of those. Oh, let's watch Real Madrid walk their way to the cup. But it's going to be interesting these next couple months because you have a lot of domestic stuff going on because you got Bayern fighting to keep the Bundesliga. You have Man City in a position where they're trying to defend their Premier League title and they're not doing too well of that right now when they have literally one of the, if not the best striker in the world right now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how
Let's talk
that's all
about
going to work
Kareem
out.
Benzema finally getting recognized for all his
Oh yeah,
contributions. I think I remember just raving about to myself about how Kareem Benzema is just he's a striker. That's all that's just what he is. He's gonna put the ball in the back of the onion bag. He's gonna
oh
do
yeah.
it. He's just a goal machine. And I think, he was given a chance to step out from Ronaldo's shine, and guess what? He carried the fucking water. He put the ball in the back of the net. Vinicius Jr. coming onto the scene. Let's talk about how successful Real Madrid has navigated getting rid of Ronaldo and letting Ronaldo go on his voyages around the world. Going to
That's
Juventus and going to United, and now playing in Saudi Arabia.
all right. We're back. So back on the topic of the Champions League of
How
the
do you
Champions
enjoy
League.
our practice ad break, everybody?
Hey, once we can finally do stuff with it, like small sound bites and whatnot, I wouldn't mind incorporating that because at one point I was doing pretty good at splicing things together. So we were talking about the Champions League quarterfinals. Um, who, as of right now, let's see here. Has there been a draw yet? I don't think there has been yet. There has not been a new draw yet as of today. So it'll be interesting to see how that will work out. Could we see Bayern play Manchester City? Could we see Real Madrid in the mix there playing a bigger team,
So
or could we see?
I think, all right. So the teams who went through, we got. I don't think Milan stand a. I think Benfica are an odd man out. If Benfica go up against, say, Napoli, my money's on Napoli. I think Napoli could beat Milan. I think Napoli could beat Chelsea. I think Napoli could beat Inter. Lord knows that I think they've beaten Inter this year. I think the teams to beat are Bayern, City, Madrid, and Napoli.
Oh yeah.
Those are my four. Those are my four teams.
Well, it's interesting to say this too, but it's almost. I mean, Chelsea has been successful recently, but they kind of seem to be one of the underdogs right now. Obviously, other than Benfica. So it's interesting to see three Italian clubs in the mix of it too. Usually, you have either three of the Spanish clubs in there, three of the Premier
I
League
mean,
teams. I mean, the Premier League has also been pretty dominant these last couple of years too, with
yeah,
Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool
minus
being in the mix.
minus Madrid's recent dominance.
Quick resurgence too at that. I
God,
mean, they won the Champions League now once since Ronaldo left. Is that right?
I want to say they've won it at least once.
Yes. And
When
now
was the?
he's at Al Nassr.
Yeah, I mean, what they've won the champions, they won the Champions League in 17, and then they won it in 2021. But remember, they won it in 13, 14, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18. They three-peated.
Oh yeah.
They three-peated the Champions League. Absolutely crazy.
Now to go back to let's go back to our show notes. So moving forward, talking the Champions League, let's talk a little bit more local ball here. So some background on Indy 11. We do plan on doing a standalone Indy 11 podcast. It's going to be called, as of right now, unless that changes, the AWOL Ultras, since we won't be physically there, but we will be following. So looking back, at least since the podcast pause, a lot has changed for the club in the last couple of years, and I didn't really think about this much until I really sat down and I wrote out like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. So in 2017, when we paused, it was right before the beginning of our last year in the North American Soccer League. Tim Hankinson, rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
Good man, may he rest in peace. Was the manager of the club then. They came off of winning their first piece of silverware with the spring season championship, made it to the final against the New York Cosmos. Fuck the Cosmos.
Fuck the
who
Cosmos.
are currently on hiatus. Which honestly, it's kind of sad to see because that whole deal, the way that
I miss having I miss the New York Indianapolis hatred week.
Oh yeah. Oh, that not to mention too. It's like now that we have the rivalry of Louisville with Lipa FC, which
can we also talk about the rise of everybody's favorite the derby that's been going on for 100 years?
Oh yeah.
The North America's most storied proximity association football contest.
Oh yeah. Divided by a murky, extremely polluted river. Well, the thing that's funny for me is, and this is where I'm going to be the odd man out because I haven't really been around much for the USL years. I've been to 2 Lipa FC matches. Indy 11 drew both of them. The ones I've been to.
I remember going to. I think it was it was one of the post seasons. I want to say I went to an away day down in Louisville, and I have family down there, so Louisville's like a second home to me. My grandma who passed, God rest her soul, got to visit with her. But so I love the rivalry we have with Louisville City.
It's a good rivalry, but it's one of those things where it's like it's hard for me to hate Louisville City. It's not like FC Cincinnati.
I hate them ironically, like in the sense that I hate that they always beat us, but I don't really have a bad word to say about it.
Right.
Like I hate the Cosmos. We fight the Rowdies. We had the Armada. We had, all sorts of good little, teams that we would talk shit against. The Eddies. Remember the Minnesota the old Dark Cloud.
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting now. Since then, Tampa Bay's in USL now. The Eddies have folded. FC Edmonton. They were in the Canadian Premier League for a short period of time. Cosmos are on hiatus right now. Indy 11 joined the USL in 2017, and that's been good for us, but it's also kind of been a double-edged sword because we haven't really been that competitive since the pandemic. So
it's been rough going. It's been rough going. I got to admit, it's been hard. I've been out in West Virginia, and part of this podcast is to get us back into the swing of being full on, stupid dipshits, in the true vein of Indianapolis dipshittery. I think, Indy 11 has had plenty of years that are bad. But I think last year was absolutely horrifically bad. One of the few almost demoralizingly bad years we've had in a while, where I think even the fans were starting to turn a little. you know.
It's one of those things where it's like it felt to me it reminded me a lot of 2017, but we also had a bad team the year before because Martin decided that the pitch conditions is why he wanted to leave Indy 11, which I thought was hilarious. Now I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure he's an assistant at Notre Dame of all things. That could be different now, but that was a year ago last time I looked.
Listen, I think Martin Rene was a solid coach. We were obviously a better team when he was our coach, but we had a ceiling, and I think we all knew that our ceiling was not champions. It was people who get knocked out.
Yep.
And I feel like, there's a lot of optimism. Now, we could talk about, a team that doesn't get knocked out, the women's team. The fact that we have a women's team that's absolutely rocking shit.
Undefeated regular season last year,
Oh,
2022 Great Lakes Division champs. They're going to be great this year.
the ladies of victory, baby. Oh my God.
That was a long time coming too, because I remember before I left Indy, there had been talk about us getting a women's team, but it was interesting because we were in that period where we put our first MLS bid out, which really did not mean shit. We gave them a nice box. The box looked nice, but it's one of those things where it's like long term because we have this. We're gonna have the stadium in 2025. They'll be breaking ground on that in May. It'll be interesting to see what the club does. Do we move to NWSL from the USL? They call it USLW, right?
I
what
think
it is?
so. I
Because
think
they
it's
have
the USL branch, but I could be
because they
wrong.
have like the USLW Super League, but I don't know any of the clubs in the other women's league other
It's the
than what
USLW league, yeah.
yeah. And it's going to be interesting these next couple of years because the team we have this year is going to be I feel like is going to be a lot better than they were last year. I would hate to say it, but I feel like this might be Mark Lowry's hot seat year for them to do something. But I mean, you also have to keep in mind too the team that he inherited the year before was garbage, and a lot of them came back
Yeah.
at that time. This is a completely new team except for Solomon Asante, I'm pretty sure. So as for the women's team though, it's been a ride. It's been nice to see. It's funny for us because the club has been able to get really good in all these different areas. Our academy team, 2021 Academy League champions. The women's team debuted last year. They're the Great Lakes Division champ, had an undefeated regular season. Now it's time to get our men's team back up there.
Yeah, I really hope that the promise of a new stadium, which as someone who studies economics and has done some stuff about sporting events, Indy 11 is not going to be what's drawing people to the hotels. But the fact that Indy 11 is tied to a bunch of hotels, which just makes the city have more capacity to host people, you know, I'm thrilled for the entire venture. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. I remember in my like freshman Q10 course at Ball State giving a speech about how the Indy 11 should have a new stadium, and I'm fucking thrilled that we have one. I cannot control the profanities of joy that will come out of my mouth because I'm just so happy. Even though we're gonna leave the mic, America's favorite dive bar,
Oh yeah. Well,
it's this.
not to mention too, we haven't had the greatest record since we left the painted lines of Lucas Oil Stadium, which I think is funny too. Is like we made it to the conference finals in 2019, and I'm pretty sure we were at Lucas Oil for 2020. I'm pretty sure, and then after that, we went back to the mic in 2021. Had
Yeah.
a awful last two seasons.
and,
I'm
and
hyped about this because it's been so long.
I mean, this just feels like we're 10 years. We're going to be going into what, almost 10 years of Indy 11. and the 11th year we get the stadium. Does it not feel right?
Oh yeah.
In the 11th year, we get our brand new stadium. We get our facility that'll be absolutely making the south side of Indianapolis sparkle. I can't be more enthusiastic for the vision of the club, even if I'm not 100% sure that the results on the pitch will be anything home to write about. You know what I mean? I feel like Indy 11 is going to be back to its rightful stature as the pride of the Midwest. Even if we're not the best team, we're the fucking pride of the Midwest. We'll drink with you. We'll play with you. We won't fight you. We won't shoot you. I mean, you got to be careful in downtown bars nowadays, from what I hear in Indianapolis.
Or if you serve in a foreign military, Indy will go to
Yeah.
war with you. So
Yeah. If you're within touching distance of Indianapolis, you're too close. You're within invading distance of Indianapolis. But the Indy 11 are. I can't tell you too much about the team. I'm not 100% well versed as to the strengths and weaknesses that we have, because quite honestly, the team last year seemed like it was just full of weaknesses. So much so that being distant and going through some tough patches. It was tough to really get enthusiastic about the Indy 11, but the future is bright. We have a team, we have a league. I remember that was something that, back maybe 6 years ago, was something that when we were in the NASL, there was always a question of what happens. Is the NASL going to be around? Well, it's no longer around, but Indy 11 survived.
well, I think another thing too is that since then, since we're talking of just soccer wars in general, NISA became a thing. They're basically the
Yeah.
NASL 2.0, well 3.0, I guess you could say. So it'll be interesting to see what the next zombie of the NASL will be. But
Yeah.
you got to think though, at that point, we had the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. They're no longer a thing.
Yeah.
We have what Chicago House AC was in NISA for a year. Now they play in a development league. So I
I mean, the trials and
I would
tribulations
like.
of American soccer, man. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
I think Indy 11. We just need to be happy that we made it out of the. We had our fun in the NASL. We hoisted a spring championship that, I still remember to this day, storming the pitch with the Brickyard Battalion, and seeing Brad Ring chug, just absolutely fucking slam a beer. To this day is one of my favorite memories. I think the Indy 11 have plenty of room to create more memories going forward. And
I
these and
will.
these bad seasons are just gonna make the good times feel even better.
Oh yeah. It'll be interesting too, being being from the outside looking in. One of the things that is interesting about being down here in Southern Indiana is our college programs. Like U of E has a partnership with Indy 11. So it's interesting when you go to one of their games, they'll have a banner up that says "We support Indy 11" or something like that. But being 3 hours away from Indianapolis, you don't ever hear about people going to Indy for anything down here. It's always, oh, I'm going to Nashville or I'm going to Louisville. So it's interesting to see how much things have changed. And then coming back to the new stadium, it's like, what what is next for us in terms of, do we stay in the USL Championship, kind of partner off with Louisville City, or do we try to go to that next level? I I've got an odd feeling that in the
I got
next 2 years we're
I got it.
probably going to see an MLS 2 type situation that
I feel
isn't.
I feel like if MLS like fully commits to pro rel ever, it'll have to somehow be MLS 1, MLS 2, and they're going to have to be very selective about the stadium quality, support, infrastructure. And I think Indy 11 is poised. If there is an expansion that would see a team like Louisville City get in, I feel like Indy 11 will be shortly thereafter.
Oh yeah.
So the question is, how much more is MLS going to expand? Are they going to continue to absorb teams? If so, what are the conditions? Because Indy 11 with a new stadium, in a major complex with a good history of independent soccer and coming into the USL MLS kind of umbrella, we'd be well poised. And the question is, fuck yeah, I'd support Indy 11 for MLS in a weird way.
Well,
The only
not to mention the structure that we would have in place already, but the stability of being in MLS.
exactly. Or, the question is, you want to be able to see the butts in the seats. And I think MLS would guarantee more butts in the seats, more so than even, just, the quality amenities of the new stadium. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think, once they have the stadium, they need to build the team because they've already built you built the stadium and they will come. Now you just have to make sure that there's something to watch, right?
One thing that I has always kind of made me question things with the club is how we never really took the Open Cup that serious, which I feel
Well,
like is
well, the fans did.
underrated.
The
Yeah,
I know from my time going to some away days on the buses and all the drinks and the smoke, we took it seriously. It
right.
just we were never able to get the results that the seriousness that we wanted to take it with would have resulted in.
I think, and I'll have to look into the statistics of this. I think the last time we played an MLS side had to have been like in the Open Cup.
We played Chicago Fire.
I think that was the last time we did
I
because we
remember.
played. Um, I remember going up to Detroit the year they lost to the Michigan
Oh,
Bucks.
oh, don't remind me of that fucking result. Oh my
Oh yeah.
god.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Pete. Can I tell you my personal favorite Indy 11 Open Cup memory was our first game against Louisville City. It was with like Martin. No, it was still
Was that
Martin.
2015?
Yeah, it was
I'm
2015 with
pretty.
Martin Rene, and I remember Peter Evans, the capo, and one of the saints of the BYB. Um, Absolutely just apologized to the fans for what we just saw because we went into extra time. It was cold and rainy. It was like a drawn game, 0-0 or something. And then they scored two and they won like 2-0 in extra time. And we had to sit there through the rest of the fucking soaked 20 minutes watching the Indy 11 just piddle around trying to go back 2 goals after getting just smashed in like the first like 5 or 6 minutes.
Was that at
And I
Grand Park?
no, that was at the mic. I can't remember. I want to say it was 2-0, but it was absolutely the worst gutting feeling I've ever felt as an Indy 11 fan because it was like, well, the coach is probably getting fired. Not after Martin, Jurgen. I'm Jurgen Summer. Welcome to Jackass.
Yeah, for real though.
And
I'm
my
looking this.
favorite T-shirt that I think about with that day is I'm Jurgen Summer. Welcome to Jackass. Because I've never wanted a guy fired more than after that match. I sat I got done we got done watching it. I went home and I just thought, God damn it, that's it. Summer out.
So I was around for the first time we played Louisville City at home in the Open Cup. I think that was 2015. I could be wrong. It was either 2015 or 2016. And I'm looking up the 2017 Open Cup right now. I'm pretty sure that was when we lost to the Michigan Bucks.
Well, I remember
But
the oh God, remember when we were in the NPSL? We had a fourth tier team.
that was fantastic.
Dude, I remember going to all those fucking games at Graham Park. I remember the smoke that got let off at the game against Cincinnati in the Open Cup. where Indy 11-2, all we did was score, and that's all we wanted was one goal, and we got our goal.
That team is okay too. Um, it's interesting though, looking in the future, however, how we managed to have a decent academy team once we got to USL. I mean, they've managed to be competitive. They won the cup in 2021. I think they made it to the final last year and lost. I think they lost like Orange County or something like that. And then kind of we'll see how this year goes. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this team can do this year because they had a decent game against Tampa Bay. A couple, it was like last Saturday. Their next game isn't until the 25th. Have you had the chance to look at the new roster at all?
I think I took a glance at it, but I don't think any of the names stuck.
So
I don't think any of the I don't think any of the names are as familiar to me.
It's a completely new team. That's one thing that's going to be nice about this year is the fact that we'll be able to like actually kind of fall in love with new players versus some old fan favorites. I know.
I mean, granted, it'd be so great to have Tyler Pasher back or something like that. Or
oh yeah,
God, man, I miss Brad Ring. I miss my Brad Ring. I miss my diamond in the midfield.
So in the Tampa Bay game, so number 13 Winzati used to be a Tampa Bay Rowdy. He had a pretty good game. He got up in the face of them a couple times. I don't think he got carded, but he almost did. One of the Tampa Bay got carded pretty hard in that game. They had 4 yellow cards. The only reason why we ended up actually doing anything in that game is we managed to draw a foul in extra time and got a penalty out of it. That's how we got the draw. But for a team that's on the comeback, drawing against one of the best sides in the Eastern Conference, I'd say they had a pretty good start to the year.
I'll take
another fun thing about that Tampa Bay roster. Ironically, one of their strikers, Cal Jennings, signed on to Indy 11. Never played a single minute for the team. Didn't even make it out of the preseason and got sent to like Las Vegas Lights or something like that last year or 2 years ago now. I think it would have been 2 years ago now because it was still when Martin was the manager. But, Solomon Asante's back. He was really, I got to see him play live a few times.
That name reminds, that's the only name that sounds familiar, Solomon Asante.
He did really, really well at Phoenix. I got to see him play when Phoenix was on kind of near their ceiling before they made it to the non-existent USL Championship final. So it's interesting kind of seeing him in checkered blue now. The thing is he's one of those players where I feel like it'd be kind of cool to see him do some stuff, but I'm also kind of skeptical on like people want to see him in his form that he was in then, but he's an older player now, so it'd be interesting to see. But my favorite player so far from the first game was Odell. If I butchered that name, I apologize, but he did really well between the goalposts. Only one goal was conceded, but the thing is I think after they tie it up and they get some more games under their belt, I think they're going to be a decent team this year.
What would be a good result for you this season? To me, I just want to see a mid-table result. We're going into a new stadium year. I want to know that we'll have a team ready for next year. I want to know that 2023, we'll be ready for 2024. We'll be ready for 2025.
Honestly, I would be okay with a mid-table result, but I feel like a playoff appearance would be nice because the thing is with the USL Championship is you don't have to have the greatest year to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they still do the divisions for the playoff format like they did during the pandemic. I'm going to look it up here. I'm just going to go off of 2022's format. But I don't think there's divisions this year. The thing is if they can, it says, so if they can make the top seven, I could see them making the playoffs. I mean, they almost did last year. They were only 2 points away from, actually, no, they weren't 2 points away. They were way off that, but they were a point off from being in the eighth seed. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. A few notable clubs that they'll have to get through, obviously, in the Eastern Conference is going to be Louisville, obviously. Detroit City will be decent this year. Pittsburgh is always up there too.
Oh, can we talk about? Wait, I totally forget the Detroit City. God,
they moved up last year too.
I still think about to this day what Peter Evans told me about what he wanted to do for a tifo against them. It would just be a white sheet, and it would just say, "Who?"
Oh yeah. The thing is, I never got the chance because I know they were. What league were they in before? They were a non-league side, right? Like they were NPSL or something crazy like that.
Yeah, they were so out of the American system, and then they've made their way into the USL. In some ways, Detroit needs its wins, but I'm gonna say who, because their supporters are just obnoxious. I mean, they're from Detroit. What else can you say?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
well, it's kind of Detroit City is one of those clubs too, where they kind of give me like, and given they played St. Pauli in a friendly before, they're kind of like one of those like teams that you like grunge teams that you could follow.
Yeah,
but I mean, they moved up. They've been fantastic so far.
Granted, I'm all for Indy 11 hosting St. Pauli, but I mean, we mostly host what, Mexican teams, right?
Oh yeah.
Although I
don't even know last time I did that.
Although I'd be all for us hosting some game against, I don't know, bring in Newcastle and just let them smack us upside the head, you know?
It could happen this summer. You never know. Looking at the table right now, and obviously this is after week one, only two teams out of the Eastern Conference have managed to win a match. Luton United, which is basically DC United Light, and then Louisville City, which it's interesting because they both both ties were 3-1 for both games. Indy sits in fifth right now, so I mean honestly, if they got up there where they were fighting between a seventh or an eighth seed and made the playoffs, I would say this year would be a success on their end, especially if they want to build around Mark and the next year or two going forward. And I could see them doing that because of his success out on the West Coast with El Paso. But it's one of those things too where it's like, do you really want to do a big rebuild before you build a new stadium, or do you want to just kind of settle in and really start honing in on what the team's going to look like here in the next year or two going forward? Another thing too that's nice about this situation now is we've been in the USL long enough to where we can actually develop. And we've seen that with our youth academy. We actually managed to sign like 5 youth academy players to our first team recently. So
that's something I wanted to bring up. If our youth team is going to be winning championships or competing, promote the kids.
Oh yeah.
Give them a contract. Worst case scenario, you're able to make a financial return on transfers.
Well, another thing too is we've seen clubs in the league manage to capitalize on that. Louisville City being one of them. In fact, I think they have 2 players. One of them plays for Benfica, and one of them went to like Real Sociedad or something like that. So it's showing. I think it's nice to see that the academy system, especially in the U.S., has fucked up as U.S. soccer is, which that's going to be an episode all in itself, which we'll have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
How that's all gonna like ride in the future. But next match for us, we don't play our first home match until April, but we play a match the 25th, and we will be up against Detroit City. Be a 3 p.m. time. It's going to be in Detroit. Detroit is currently 0-1, have no points on the table. Head to head wise, in the two games that we played them last year, we drew our first. We drew our first. Well, no, they beat us in their first game, and we drew 0-0 the second match. So it's interesting because we're in a situation where we have a completely new team. Statistically, we'll have to do some research on who do we think is going to be out of this
Yeah,
group is going to actually be able to do anything.
yeah.
But
We'll figure a lot of things will make themselves known as the games are played. And I think, I think we're coming up on probably about a good stopping point. I think the big takeaway I want to maybe bring from this podcast is the status of American soccer is good. The national team may not be doing great, may have their controversies, but I think the game of football has never been more popular um, in the U.S. or abroad. I think we're gifted with our team finding success in survival and in building for the future, and I think that's all we can hope for. I found myself over the last 6 years not only becoming an Arsenal diehard, aside from just being a regular Arsenal fan when this started, but I really became a diehard. But also I have a friend from Rio de Janeiro, and now I've become a giant Flamengo fan.
there you
Because
go.
so I have two teams that that really I follow. I follow my European, and now I've even started to follow Brazilian leagues and South American cups and CONMEBOL and Libertadores and the beautiful South American soccer that's on display with the amount of money that's being pumped in from TV deals. And it's just the state of the game is great. It's going to be great to see what Indy 11 can do, and I really hope that we put our youth in positions to succeed, so that we can have ourselves a homegrown core going into the new season. Because oh boy, it'd be nice to inaugurate the cornfield with a win.
Oh yeah, for sure. So one thing
I
I
think
will
that I think
say,
that's all I hope for is a win on the opening day of the new stadium.
right, in closing of this first episode in this new era of this podcast, is it's been a long time. It's been rough for me these last couple of years to actually really hone in and follow sports. So it's nice to get back to being able to enjoy every little thing that goes into it. For me, it's like I've been able to follow the domestic league, like a lot of the U.S. side of things these last couple of years, but Europe for me has been hard. So it's good to finally be back and to be able to actually be able to follow and actually be opinionated and to connect with people on that again. So it'll be interesting to see what all we'll be able to accomplish here in the coming months. So that's all I got for it. Do you have anything else you want to add on before we sign off for this one?
May Tottenham never find success.
Agreed. Let's hope Everton gets relegated too. Just fuck
I
Everton.
no, I don't want them to get relegated. I want them to finish 16th every year and fear relegation and never know success. That's what I want. I want to beat them to death with a hammer.
I mean, I like the Merseyside derby, but it's one of those things where it's like, we'll see. Well, with that, I'm Logan.
I'm Colin.
Thank you for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes. We'll probably figure out a lineup of what we're going to be talking about here in the future. We
And
also would like to get guests on here as well. It's always great to have a third person.
So if you
here.
consider yourself a fellow AWOL Ultra, feel free to reach out to us and we'll put you on.
Always. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Hasta luego.